Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
It's Monday. There's still 3 games left in FPL. So this week on a Monday, it's not a full podcast, it's People's Poll. So why don't you give everybody a rundown of what we put out and what ended up being a fairly comfortable winner in the conversation, sir?
Well, I was thinking about what to put in for a topic on Saturday night, and I thought, you know what, sleep on it. There's bound to be some scandals on Sunday morning. And I woke up to about 6 different DMs from people who said, can you do a podcast on Football Index? Okay, what's happened here with Football Index? Start doing a bit digging. Oh, okay. There were 3 subjects to vote on in people's poll vote. The March World Cup qualifiers have been postponed in South America. This is an ongoing story that's probably going to develop over the next week or two. And I guess there's some doubt towards the European qualifiers as well. There's a number of instances at the moment where certain players go to certain countries. They'll have to isolate for a couple of weeks when they come back and therefore won't be able to play for a while. I think we're kind of aware of the case with David De Gea at the moment, that once he comes back from Spain, he won't be able to play for Manchester United straight away. So he's possibly not going to be able to play to April. There's a lot of concern amongst Premier League managers and clubs at the moment with that in mind. That's going to be a developing story. Also, we put into the vote the theory of Arsene Wenger, which is gaining some traction, this potential change to the offside law, which his idea is that rather than any part of your body being offside is offside, any part of your body onside will equal onside. I have some strong opinions on this, and my strong opinion is that it will make life worse. Yes, there'll be more goals, but a little bit like when they changed the offside laws back in the early noughties to make players not interfering, obviously onside. What it just meant was that defenders just played a lot deeper and football become more negative, and that will be the end result of this, in my opinion. I'm sure this subject will come back round again.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it yesterday because when they started checking Harry Kane's second goal, and I was like, no, come on. Son's, you could tell from the 6-yard line, Son's ahead of him. But then when they started looking at the point that's of Son's foot that was making contact with the ball, which was his furthest back point, and Harry Kane's furthest forward point, it's like, stop. Stop. Come on, man. This is stupid. It was absolutely stupid. And I have to admit, at that time, I didn't know that the offside line is from whatever part of your body makes contact with the ball, not your overall full body or your furthest forward point or whatever.
Last night in the Tottenham game was quite an unusual one. We haven't really seen many VAR interferences on goals like that. Obviously, under the Wenger law, that wouldn't even get looked at. You just go, okay, he's basically in line, fine, crack on, off you go.
Yeah.
But my opinion is, yes, you'll see more goals scored, and it seems to be in a session of we want more goals scored. This will not fix the VAR offside problem, honestly. It's not going to fix things for spectators in grounds when we get back, etc. But I think we'll come back to that one. There was an overwhelming winner of the vote. It was the Football Index crisis, the price crash, and dividend restructure. Over half of votes were for this, which is interesting because it doesn't relate to fantasy football in any way, like the other 2 could be construed to relate to it. So it's interesting that it won the majority vote by quite a long way. It has been a mad weekend in, let's call it, the betting industry. I've got some background having worked in that industry for 11 years for a high street bookmaker, so I've got a little bit of understanding of gambling and its rights and its wrongs. It's worth saying in the first instance, neither me or Suj have a Football Index account. So we're not going to be giving out any advice in terms of what you should do with your shares or anything like that. We're going to cover what has happened, basically.
And I think I'd ask you the question first, James, because I know from my point of view, why did you never get into Football Index? Did you ever think about it? Because if I had more time, I was going to say, had I have more time, that don't make sense as an English sentence. If I had more time, I probably would have, because from the outside, and I have a very layman's understanding. Well, to be fair, now I have a bit more of a in-depth understanding, but at the time, as a layman's understanding, it looked like quite an attractive and interesting product.
We had a discussion about it very briefly, I think, last summer about the idea of football index. And I explained to you then, I happily explain it to all the listeners now. I was quite heavily involved in Betfair exchanges, probably between around about 2005 and 2008, before they became extremely popular. And what I used to do was essentially trade match odds on games and fix in a profit before a match started. So I didn't care who won or lost or drew. What I was trying to do was buy and sell a price based on my experience in the industry from other people's odds, etc., and news, and know that if a market price would essentially go up or down. Now, this has some relations to football index, as I explained to you at the time. I'll give you a case scenario of the best trade I ever did. I was working in a shop, and Stoke were due to play Liverpool the next day. And breaking news came on the screen: yellow bar, Sky Sports News, Steven Gerrard and Fernando Torres ruled out for Liverpool. At the time, I had a couple of thousand in the account. I just smashed all of it on Stoke. All of it. Right there and then. Bang. Went home and laid Stoke. So bet against Stoke. By the time I got home, the odds had crashed so much. And I locked in a couple of £100 profit, no matter what the result was. Now, there's times where that's gone the other way and I've been stung a little bit, not as badly as that. But I remember I had a game where I was trading on a League Two game, and unknown to me, half the squad was ill. So I'd backed a team to win, and after I'd done that, it came out that half the team was ill. So I had to lock in a fixed loss before the game started. So that's a risk. It's risk and reward, but I used to be quite good at it. And then the market became so volatile with Betfair in terms of the amount of people that were on there. I found that you had to be on the news within seconds to take advantage of something like that. And I just didn't have the time to do it. And when we spoke about football index, I said to you, do you know what, with time and investment and research, it probably does look like there's ways of making money in this. And what I said to you then was, I don't have the time, partly because of the podcasts and stuff to actually do it.
The same could be applied for, I don't invest in the stock market, which is a similar thing. But here's the thing with football index, and I think it's important to get a few things out there right from the off. Firstly, there is a lot more content out there from people that play regularly about the ins and outs of football index. So as much as we're not here to explain to you the rules of how the payouts work and all that kind of stuff. If you want to get under the skin of it a little bit more, head over to YouTube or wherever else, and you will find there are content creators, much like FPL, talking about the ins and outs of what has happened here. And in addition, like from a language point of view as well, football index is really strange because they use phrases like traders and stock market and exchange and buy, sell, bid, ask, all of these kind of trading terms which are associated with financial products and financial stock markets, but it is a gambling product at the end of the day. So we are making bets and we are gambling and there are odds and so on and so on. So the way that the gambling product has been packaged up can look quite different, and people get kind of hoodwinked into thinking this is not a gambling product. But at its core, we have to always remember that it is a gambling product, even though we use stock market type terminology potentially around football index. And it still exists, despite what happened at the weekend. The platform is still there. People can still go and put money in. I wouldn't even suggest that that's a sensible thing.
No one's opening a new football index account today, mate.
Nah, trust me.
We don't need to sell that to anyone. No. We're not doing it.
And we'll talk about what has happened in a second. The thing that came off, which surprised me and upset me more than anything else, is within the community of football index investors, let's call them traders. I think traders is the terminology that
I think so.
Content creators and so on and so on. The amount of guilt and shame is incredible. People feel, oh, it's my fault, I was duped. Content creators saying, I invested hours and hours creating content, helping people. I wish I hadn't. I can't believe I've let myself get lured into this. I'm blown away by the amount of personal shame and guilt that people feel in a scenario where they've been fucked over. And that's what's hurting me in this situation, is that people have been led down a road, which we're going to talk about in a second, and how. And yet, for the vast majority of conversations, how much of it is personal guilt. And I can understand in a betting scenario, I bet on Crystal Palace to beat Spurs, Spurs beat Palace, I lose my money. This is not quite like that, where I understand, yes, we all take personal responsibility over our money and what we do. And if you place a bet, you know the risks, etc., etc. But the way this is dressed up is not in the same way that first goal scorer, all that kind of stuff, you know? And I feel for people that have that personal shame. I understand when you've lost money, it's difficult. I don't want to go so far as to say it's not your fault. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be judge and jury and say where blame lies and stuff.
I feel sorry for every trader within that community this morning. Seeing and obviously doing the deep dive into it over the last 24 hours to see what the thing is. Again, I must stress, me and Suj are not experts on this subject. We've just done a little bit of research into it. I too have seen videos like what you're commenting on YouTube, where people feel like they've been given advice to people to help them make money. Let's be real. And the advice hasn't been wrong. And that's where the guilt comes in. It's a little bit like, imagine I said to you, to relate it to an FPL terms, imagine I said, I know factually Bruno Fernandes, and I know factually that Bruno Fernandes is injured and he's going to be out this weekend. And I tell everyone that, and I tell everyone to sell him. And then he rocks up and scores a penalty at the Etihad after 30 seconds. Bad times, right? That's different to advising to sell in Bruno Fernandes to advising to say, correct, I know he's fucked, right? And these people were acting in good faith in terms of what they're doing. And that's where the guilt comes from, because they've been using their products, obviously help enhance people's portfolios, I think is what they would describe it as.
Let's put it this way. You're second in your mini league, and you know the guy ahead of you has Bruno Fernandes, and this is £1,000 cash mini league, and you advise him to sell Bruno Fernandes.
He's going to know I'm lying.
You overtake him. Yeah, that's probably true. And suddenly you pocket the £1,000 and he loses. That's to take the analogy to the level and extent that it's going, because it's deceptive. You creating content, and I understand that, and people acting on it is one thing, picking a best captain and what have you. This is people's money that we're talking about. So the consequences of the decisions are not, a green arrow or a red arrow. This is people's money that we're in the situation of talking about. And the biggest problem here is the most recent events of the last, say, 4 to 6 weeks and what's happened. Do you want to give people a rundown? Do you want me to talk about the dividend scam?
Oh, I want you to talk about the dividend scam. I mean, what I can certainly say is that just one thing to go back on was Football Index as a company has been around since 2015. You mentioned about understanding that they are a betting product. Well, until 2019, they were advertising themselves as an alternative to gambling, and were warned strongly by the Gambling Commission, who I would suggest are probably not done with Football Index as of right now, that they were false marketing themselves, and that they had to license themselves in their T's and C's as a gambling company, because that's what they are. And they are under the jurisdiction of the Gambling Commission in Jersey and the UK. The Gambling Commission is basically an authority figure where every licensed bookmaker in the UK basically has to be under them. And what the Gambling Commission does is check over that these guys are regulating themselves properly. So they obviously, look, gambling companies are there to make money. We don't have to lie about it, but they can't be aggressive in their marketing. They have to be honest with their terms and conditions, etc. So perhaps there might be a query about certain people getting paid out and the bookie doesn't want to pay them out. It could be that it goes as far that the Gambling Commission would step in and determine who's going to make that. That's obviously not going to happen over a £5 bet. We're talking about large stuff here. Sure. But the Gambling Commission essentially is they're the law abider. They're the football association, if you will, of betting companies.
Yep. Yeah, there definitely isn't the end of this story in terms of that point of view. So in essence, what happens with Football Index is you can buy it and sell shares in players. So whether they cost £2, £5, £50, whatever it may be. Well, it's not £50. I think that the most expensive might be in and around about £10, £15.
Lionel Messi's sort of between between about £7 and £9 or so.
Right, okay.
Like
And I know
roughly.
Jadon Sancho's around about £9 for
Jadon Sancho is the
£7.50
extreme crash that a lot of people have been referencing in this share price.
And obviously, you can buy a player at a certain price and you can sell him at a certain price. And if you sell him more expensive than you bought him, you make a profit. Fairly straightforward system, right? The price of the player goes up and down depending on the media interest and whether other traders want him or not and what have you, similar to an existing stock market. But in addition to that, you can earn money through dividends. If a player does well and is in the news, you get a dividend. If a player is performing well on the pitch, they used to have in-play dividends or match day dividends or whatever the terminology they want to use. Now, as of Friday, they cut the maximum dividend that a player could earn by just over 70%, from 14p to 3p. Meaning that if you own the player and you're thinking, right, okay, I know Harry Kane's going to score goals week in, week out, I'm going to keep picking up my dividends week in, week out, you're probably forecasting that you could get a certain percentage return on ownership of your money. So I'm going to stick 10 quid in. Harry Kane might not go up in value, but at least I know week in, week out, he's going to keep scoring goals and keep creating assists. So I'm going to keep drip feeding in the money. So I might not make money in the growth over the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever time length you decide to keep him, but I'll get my dividends. The ability to earn money from dividends is gone down by over 70%. And suddenly you're like, well, if I've got a tenner and I'm going to make 10% return in a year, and I've got a tenner and I'm only going to make 2 or 3% return in a year, it's very, very different.
Yeah.
Very, very different.
You
The
need
problem is you don't have a tenner.
Yeah.
It's
now
a share. And now, if I want to sell that share, you're not going to offer me a tenner anymore, because you're saying, well, hang on a second, I'm only going to get 2 or 3%. I'm going to give you a fiver for that share. And the price of all the players, as a result of the decision that Football Index made, in amongst a series of events, means that I think over half the players, from my understanding, there's in the region of 3,500 players that you can trade on the platform. 1,800 of those players, at the time of recording or at the time of me understanding that information, no longer had a sell price.
You couldn't sell them.
Half the players in the game, if you wanted to liquidate and get your money out, had no sale price. And the other half have obviously plummeted in value. Pennies on the pound.
It's why I referenced you might have thought, why did I did the Stoke Liverpool story at the start? That's part recognizing that is to reference this in terms of what a lot of people do, obviously, in terms of the share pricing of players. Let's take the example of Jadon Sancho, because he's been a very, very popular player for a lot of traders on Football Index. Young, up-and-coming player, doing bits in the Bundesliga, breaking into the England team. The players that, the way I see it is, and I'm no expert on this, but a lot of the investment comes towards young, developing players who are going to go on.
Yep.
And, your Mbappe's, your Haaland's, whatever. Their share price is going to keep going up and up and up. You also can win dividends from people who do very well in kind of media recently. I know, like, to give a different perspective from someone who's a young player, I know there's a lot of traders have been investing quite a lot in Gareth Bale recently, because he's suddenly come back into the attention. Everybody's talking about him all the time, etc. So to give you an example, let's say Jadon Sancho was £3 2 years ago. I have no idea what he was. But then you invested in him. Say you bought 100 shares at £3 and then he's gone up to £7. Then you're looking at a substantial profit at that stage. And to be honest, with someone like Jadon Sancho, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, he isn't even kind of tipped at, you've got a European Championship coming up. Imagine if he does great for England in that tournament, etc. And keep going, right? And see him then suddenly crash overnight through a period where the site was suspended, by the way, so no one could do anything about it, for it just to reopen the next morning. And Jadon Sancho, I think, was worth 70p or something. Literally, these players couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Do you think the fixture announcement by official Premier League at 6:31 was taking the piss? A Football Index releasing their press statement as soon as the market closes is also taking the piss. Now, you're thinking, all right, cool. So players got up and down in price, all well and good. That's how a market works, and that's how a market should work. But when the people in control of the market are doing ridiculous things, and in my opinion, criminal things, that's when it becomes incredibly unfair on the people investing money.
Well done for saying, in my opinion.
Listen, we're not affiliates, and I couldn't give a fuck. They can go fuck themselves from what I've read so far. Here's where it gets. Oh shit! Okay, this is not right. So there are a fixed number of shares in any given player, but what the company can do is release new shares in players, and obviously the value of all the existing shares has to go up or down to make sure that you don't lose out. But they can say, okay, there's 50,000 shares in player X. We're going to release 1,000 new shares. The people that own the 50,000 shares will increase the value of your shares so that you're still, whole. But those 1,000 new shares, whoever buys those shares, we get the money. Referred to as minting shares, from my understanding, the way they call it, right? Releasing new shares, lock them in, buy them, job done. These bastards have been releasing new shares in multiple players
Like Jadon Sancho.
for months and cleaning up in the hundreds of thousands on money, selling new shares, knowing, and you can't tell me that they didn't know that imminently, within days and weeks, they were going to pull the plug on dividends as a massive way that people get returns. You can't tell me they didn't know this.
I'm not going to, unfortunately.
So this is now where we get to the point where they must have known what was going on, and the financial situation of the company and the liquidity in the market, because liquidity gets talked about quite a lot as well as a problem, right? And that's twofold, because for a market to be effective, you need money to be being moved around, players being bought, players being sold, players being bought, players being sold. So the liquidity in the football index market itself dried up, and we can talk about that. And the liquidity in the business must be fucked because they don't have enough cash to pay out these dividends because people have been doing well. I just think they didn't understand that football fans are clever enough to figure out which players are doing well, which players are not. And in addition, the good players have been performing. So if you have good players doing well and performing, you're going to be paying out money. And these good young players, the Haalands and Sanchos of the world, have been playing well and delivering. And that's eventually caused the problem. And of course, people probably are not investing as much into the market.
So Football Index were previously taking a 2% commission off of successful trades anyway. That's how Betfair used to make their money when I traded with them. They would take, I think it was 5%, maybe it was less, maybe it was 2% with them as well. They take a commission of your profit, which obviously funded them to run the site, etc., etc.
Staff and all the rest of it, sponsoring QPR and whatever else they want to do. And to be fair, that's a fine business model because you get brokers in currency and you get brokers in anything, right? You get a broker in the middle who takes a cut for processing the transaction. I'm fine with that. I've got no problem with them making a bit of money in the middle, and there's a bit of margin between the buy and sell price. It's how markets work, understand. But you've got to be able to pay your bills with that commission.
So what do you think happens next? Because there's a lot of people out there who obviously, we've heard some people sort of have been, I just looking through social media, people looking at like 5-figure sums in terms of loss of money. So you're going into tens of thousands where they built a portfolio up where the thing is, it's not like you can say, oh, Jadon Sancho got injured for 6 months and you go, right, well, I know that his price is going to drop, so I'm probably going to sell him off here or something like that. So for him to lose like 1,000% of his value overnight, because they've crashed the markets, basically. What do you think happens next to the people who have sitting there with the money in the accounts who can't do anything? Is it just a case of sitting there and hoping that the gambling commission gets involved and does something about this? There's a very murky line in Football Index's terms and conditions, which has been there before this happened. And I've looked at this and it's obviously still there. It's in their terms and conditions that they can change basically the structure of a bet with 30 days notice.
Yeah, it changes the way dividends are paid out within
So
30 days notice.
yeah, so some of might seen the extreme example that's been referenced by someone on Twitter, but I'll use it and copy it. If you put a tenner on Leicester City to win the Premier League title when they won it at 5,000 to 1 under Football Index's terms and conditions, they could have looked at that halfway through the season and said, fuck me, the payout on that's too big. We can't afford it. We're going to drop the terms and conditions on that.
Yeah, which is where this is getting a bit frustrating now.
It's now 5 to 1 or something like that.
GamCare should have checked, or the Gambling Commission should have checked these T's and C's in advance. In addition to that, in terms of the T's and C's, James, there are clauses around where the money is held. I would have assumed that the bank account where the investor money is held could and should be different to the bank account that you use to run the business on a day-to-day basis. So none of this money is ring-fenced anywhere. It's not in a pot somewhere that these people can withdraw their money at any given point. So where that money comes from, should they have to repay it? If it doesn't exist, people aren't going to be getting their money back. Wow. People are in this very similar situation now, but they're like, oh, well, it's worth fuck all. I may as well just leave it in there now. And I can understand that. The company themselves have said that they're going to replace the dividend structure with a different dividend structure. Heard that before. They've talked about new features, new things being introduced into the market for the best part of 6 to 9 months now, and they've never released anything. So on a promise, are you going to leave your money in there? Are you not going to leave your money in there? It's fucked, right? It is fucked. You have to look at, historically, there was a company called SportDAC that were a similar product, went under because they couldn't get the money to work. There's a lot of talk that Footstock is up the creek as well financially at the moment, can't get the model to work. So I don't know is the answer. I have very little hope of people getting their money back. And I have very little hope of the business being able to be revived, which is incredible because as well as I'm talking about the shame and guilt that people have of what's happened, personal shame and personal guilt, I see and feel the passion in the product. People love it.
Yeah.
This is the thing. People love it and they enjoyed it and they liked the concept. And it was just the people that ran it ended up.
Do you think there's a chance here that they get taken over by another company? I've heard mentions of like 88 Sport mentioned, for example, an online gambling company.
I don't know the scale of the organizations because if you look at the Jadon Sancho share issue that they pissed about with and what have you, I think they issued 12,500 shares at £7 a pop or something along those lines. The amounts of money they're clawing in here and there is like 15 grand from that player and 20 grand from that player and 30 grand from that player for an organization that I would have assumed was in the millions. So it feels like they're penny pinching to get tens of thousands when the size of the whole is potentially millions. I think you'd need someone very wealthy to come in to be able to plug that gap. But I don't know the finances. The interesting thing is there are a number of content creators who are affiliated or were affiliated with Football Index and have decent size followings who say on content now that they tried to understand the business model, they tried to get more financial information out of the company. Everything
couldn't get nothing.
Smoke and daggers. Yeah, smoke and mirrors, sorry, not daggers. Daggers in the back is what they probably like to do. Smoke and mirrors and nothing was revealed. There was one of the founders who left back in the last year, Mike Brown as the CEO is now getting called out. There are a lot of issues and problems with this. And I think from a brand point of view, it's fascinating because people still love it. I think in their heart, they want it to work, but I just don't know if the trust will ever be there for people to reinvest in the volumes that it needs to. I'm not sure if the market's big enough, James, is the honest thing. How many FPL players? 8 million. How many engaged?
That's a lie. Half of them are robots.
Second question. How many engaged FPL players? A few 100,000, right?
Under 1 million, I'd say, yeah.
And you need to be even more engaged in something like Football Index than you would be in FPL because of the money involved and the time and the fluctuations and the permutations are even more difficult. I think their global market size of people that would be involved is never going to be big enough to be critical mass enough to see enough volume. They cited a lot of things like they wanted to get into Germany and they wanted to open up to bigger markets. And that's why they're making a lot of these changes and so on and so on. I just don't think the global market is big enough for the the enough liquidity within the football index market, not the business, to be successful. And I'm sure they've pissed money up a wall in IT and dev costs and sponsoring football clubs and all the rest of that kind of thing.
You referenced someone, Mike Bowen. Are we thinking about the
Brown.
same?
Is it Brown or Bowen? Mike B.
There's a guy, Mike Bowen, who, to my knowledge, he's the CEO
Okay, so Bowen. I thought it was
Index.
Brown, but yeah.
But he still is. You said he'd left.
No, there was a previous guy, Andy Cox, is it, or something along those lines, who was involved, and both of them are shady. Both of them are dodgy.
This Mike Bowen, I mean, he won't ever tweet ever again, so it doesn't really matter that I send people his way. He'd sent a video out. It's only on the 18th of February.
The Q&A video, yeah?
Bigging up this Q&A video, which is really important to the traders to get additional information, etc. And this is on 18th of February this year, 2 weeks ago, basically, saying, look, I want to hear your questions, etc., yada, yada, yada. Then there's a statement on the 26th of February saying, oh, sorry, we've had to postpone the Q&A till next week. The Q&A never happened. Friday night, bang, dividends /70%. And you're all.
This is the thing, right?
Fucked.
It's did they know that this problem was coming down the pipeline? And if they did, then the things that they did to encourage investors to put more money in, and the Q&A is an example of something that they did to build trust in the brand. Don't worry, trust us. Q&A is coming. This product's coming. That product's coming. If they did that, then they have just literally fucked everyone over royally by putting more money in, knowing that this crash was going to happen. Highly likely to happen.
The other guy who's was involved, I can't remember his name for the life of me now. It's Adam.
Adam Cox, is it? Or Adam something?
No, I'm going to check that out because I don't want to misquote. Blag something for a second.
Yeah, I think in answer to your question about what will happen, I think that something like this will eventually become stable.
Adam
Cole.
I
think the amount of Adam Cole, that's it. I think the amount of money that people can make from it will just be less. You're talking about the Betfair exchanges and what have you, right? The amount of money that you could make just became a lot less. It became a lot harder, but people that were engaged still want to do that. That's what I think potentially could happen. Adam Cox is the guy that left a while ago.
Adam Cole was the founder of Football Index.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure it's him who, to be honest, for the last 9 months has been quite aggressive in terms of the improvements to Football Index to make traders believe that the product was growing. Talked about a partnership with NASDAQ that didn't ever really come round, for example. Yep. There's been so much aggressive messaging in terms of we're growing to this. As little as January, a statement that was released was saying that they were in their best financial position ever. That's a lie, isn't it?
Yep. 100%. I just connected with Adam Cole on LinkedIn. Let's see if the fucker accepts my invitation.
He's probably thinking, that's the first one in a while.
Oh, mate. If he does, I'll send him a link to this podcast, Mr. Cole. Yeah, it just is. This is horrible, basically, for all the people involved. And I think we don't have answers, solutions.
No. All I can say from my little experience, and I have no experience in Football Index, but as I said, I do have some experience in terms of the gambling industry. The aggressive marketing, which looks like lies, and all the people in the Football Index community are saying these were lies, evidence after evidence of false statements given out about Football Index strength, is going to be absolutely frowned upon by the Gambling Commission. And there is a small amount of hope that this lot get taken to the cleaners by it. I don't want to see anybody be in a position where they go bankrupt as a business or anything like that. But I definitely do not want to see people who invested on the basis of trust, honest people like me and you, Suj, getting done over here. Yep. That is completely unacceptable. Yep. And this story is going to run. You may find that in a couple of months, we're looking at this as possibly one of the biggest scandals in gambling history in this country. It is not going to go away. The people are going to fight for their rights, I think. And there is such a community willing to burst for it, right? I don't think that they can just, you think they can just turn the blind eye?
No. I think they will, but I think the community. I think the community is too small. We feel it's big because we're involved in football and Twitter and what have you. I just don't think there's enough people. But I do think the Gambling Commission will do something about it. If we talk about them getting taken to the cleaners, not financially, they won't get taken to the cleaners. Probably from a they'll never be able to work in the gambling industry and sports industry and what have you. But do you remember the film The Big Short? Right, there's a
Mm.
fantastic bit at the end where they wrap the whole movie up and they talk about this happened and so many people lost their jobs and so many thousands of people got taken to court and put in prison, blah blah blah. And then it just wraps up and the guy goes, "Nah, I'm joking. One trader at Morgan Stanley was arrested and put in jail, and everybody else got away with it." I have limited faith that these guys will either go to jail or be made to pay back financially themselves. I think they will receive punishment, but it'll be the type of punishment that doesn't affect them because they're never going to get into work in the football industry in the future anyway, or sports gambling industry. I don't see them being made to pay back what has happened. I hate to be pessimistic, but people that have lost their money, I don't see how they could potentially get it back. We've seen the Madoff scandal, the Enron scandal, the pension scandals, the stock market crashes. Everyday Joe gets fucked, and people who are responsible walk away because money talks, shit walks. Unfortunately,
Do you
bad world we
think?
live in.
Do you think this was a scam from the beginning?
Yeah, well, there's a great
Wow.
video from a young guy that well, I don't know about a scam from the beginning. Maybe perhaps they did think that there was a big business to be had here. Who gives a definition of a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is exactly how to describe this, where early investors make money from the new get paid money and make money from new investors coming in, and new investors coming in keep investing on the promise of future possibilities of investment and so on and so on, and you get to the point where there's no more new investors, so everybody down the line suddenly it's a house of cards that collapses. That describes what's happened here.
And
You need
COVID
more
and COVID
money
is the
into
trigger, possibly.
I'm sure COVID hasn't helped. I'm sure COVID hasn't helped, but I know I would expect them to be able to model um, their stock market and exchange. No, hang on a second. If 80% of all the funds invested are in only 10% of the players, for example, and those 10% of players are performing at this level, and therefore the dividends we're paying out this much, then the whole thing collapses, right? It's all financial modeling. And I think their financial models were flawed from the beginning or overly optimistic, but they should have known the levers and the triggers that would have meant, hang on a second, we're over leveraged here and the whole thing's going to fall apart. And they obviously haven't. So, yeah.
I think if you're in a trader and you're listening to this, and for whatever reason, this is the first bit of content you've listened to in relation to Football Index, and you're in a position now where you're worried about your money, the first thing to say is there are companies out there like GamCare who I'd recommend getting in touch with if you're suffering mentally through gambling in any way. Secondly, I would recommend going and listen to Football Index experts, which we are not, in terms of what's the best course of action for yourself. There is a large you're saying it's small, but I'm telling you, these people are easy to find. There's a
Yeah,
large
it's
number
big
of
enough
people out there
with this
that
content, for
want to
sure.
help people at the moment. As you
Yeah.
said, there's that kind of guilt-ridden feeling of
Yeah.
Football Index content creators. They also still want to
It's a community.
help people. So you should seek advice from them. From the bits that I've read, the best course of action at the moment looks to be to do absolutely nothing
Correct.
and just
You
wait
never
at the
know.
moment.
There might be the outside chance that they release a new dividend scheme or something, and over time, the money will come back
Do
up.
not chase losses. Do
100%.
not chase losses. There's something in the terms, and I haven't seen it, but I've heard this. But there's something in the terms that basically says if you do something from April, which is after their kind of 28-day notice period of these dividend changes, then you haven't got a leg to stand on for anything if you act on their site from that point onwards. So you need to really get into the detail of the terms and conditions if you're in this position at the moment and check where you're at and what's right and wrong. But it looks to me the best course at the moment is to seek advice from the experts and not do anything at the moment. And
Correct.
for new players, well, there won't be any new players. The whole thing is dead.
It's from a reputation point of view. This is where they
Done.
screwed themselves.
they're done.
This is where they've really screwed themselves, and yeah, it is a shame. I mean, if anybody's got any questions, obviously DM James, DM us. I can only point you in the direction of people that know more than us. We're not legal experts or what have you. I've learned over the years. I mean, we've all made money, lost money, or what have you, on the odd bet here or there. I can only draw an analogy from a personal point of view. If there's any advice I can give, like I lost a few quid on Bitcoin a couple of years ago. It was all the rage. It went up, went down. I invested a bit. It completely crashed. Over years, it slowly came back up or whatever. But I lost that money, and I didn't invest on my own. It was through people that with advice and all the rest of that kind of stuff. I've had businesses that have done well, and I've had a few that have failed as well in my history. Like, I can't say that the entire business history's glittered with success. Sometimes things do go wrong. I think you have to try and always make sure that the personal loss is mitigated. Companies will lose money, right? My own company now, people that owe us money, I know will go bust or not. Well, one of the clients that we have operate in airports. James, we sell them packaging. They operate in airports. Airports have been closed for fucking 9 months, right? And now it's a ton of cash. I know it's not their fault, but they're doing what they can to actually, say, look, when things open up, we'll try and get your money back and use your products and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And through it, the point is, and the moral of the story is that I've learned that it's who, not what. And you always have to try and be careful who you invest with and who is behind it, not what the product is and what the upside is. Just, if I can say anything else, and I've learned where I've been in business and been unsuccessful, or invested money and been unsuccessful, and I look back, it's never been the what, it's always been the who. And I think this is the thing that people are flagging up with Football Index now. The owners and founders maybe weren't the right people to be investing with necessarily. And I think that's what you've got to come back with. Put your faith in the wrong people, not the wrong product per se.
I feel sorry for traders because I don't think they ever, bar a couple of things it's easy to look back in hindsight, that have kind of been shared online in the last couple of months, which weren't common knowledge, but if you dig deep enough, you can find with some warnings and stuff that these people, as I said from the start, they market themselves as not a gambling company. So, I mean, instantly we think about the gambling world, and I know this, having worked in it, the perception is murky world, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of it is, by the way. I'm not particularly protecting it. But these guys went down that route, were then told in 2019, no, actually, you are a gambling product. That would have been the first alarm bell. Why have these guys then got told, no, actually, you need to market yourself as a gambling product, because people can bet money and lose money, and therefore it's gambling. And then go back to Betfair exchanges and stuff. It's the same principle for me. Good days, bad days. You bet, you can lose money. I've got sympathy for traders massively, because I don't think I don't think they should be looking at themselves now going, why did I do this? Like, this has come from basically nowhere, from a company of the last year, as I keep saying, was pushing themselves about their growth. Get me a refer and earn, get this guy on board, there's a tenner for you, they kept pushing offers, etc., to get people involved. Aggressive marketing, in the same way, let's be honest, a gambling company probably shouldn't, but does. They were no different, unfortunately, in hindsight, but from the beginning they did look different. And you and I, Suj, had a conversation offline about Football Index last year about if there was any financial investment in it. And the only thing that stopped me and you being in this position now, it's time. Otherwise, we would probably be one of these people feeling really pissed off this morning.
Yeah, indeed. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you play Football Index and have any thoughts and comments, do head over to Twitter, where you'll see the tweet on Planet FPL Pod. By all means, share your thoughts and what have you within that thread. And if you don't play Football Index, I think it's definitely worth doing a little bit of research and just understanding it. I don't think these types of products are gone forever. I think others will spring up. We've talked about stuff in the past, and the likes of Footstock and what have you still exist. So
Footstock, by the way, put out quite a strong statement saying we are nothing like them.
yeah, I understand that. I just think it's a good opportunity for everybody to educate yourself as best you possibly can, because there's no substitute for that. And thank you for listening.
My DMs, I say this a lot, my DMs are open. My DMs are open for the sole purpose of being there if people feel they need an ear or something like that, or need some advice in any way, not just on Football Index. If you're affected, you have gambling issues, anything like that. That's why my DMs are open. My DMs are not open to share my thoughts on people's FPL screenshots. That's why my DMs are open, is for after pods like this. If you feel you want to reach out, you can. I might not have the solutions, but by all means, you can reach out. My DMs are open.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We're going to be back at you tomorrow, perhaps in a more upbeat tone, talking about FPL with a full podcast. Depends what happens with West Ham tonight, really, James. And running down all of the games.
I'll be upbeat either way.
Yeah, of course. We'll be running down all of the games, all of the points, and what have you, as we hurtle towards blank game week 29, albeit game week 28 in the middle. Stay safe wherever you are. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.